Welcome to Intellicide.
Where we try to discover what happened to intelligence in America.
Yes. And we have some very interesting times.
So I figured rolling intro. There we go. See how that works.
Okay.
So, yeah, how's your week been?
It's
Have
been
you been
okay.
sleeping better?
Huh?
Have you been sleeping better this week?
Well, yeah. Listen. The election wasn't bothering me, that much. I've told people before that no matter who ended up being president, I think fundamentally that nothing would change with me, especially being a spiritual person and believing in my Lord and Savior. That I'm going to trust in Him more so than any person that's running the White House. Now, I do prefer
Pardon me.
Russian. I prefer President or VP Biden over President Trump, but a lot of people they weren't happy with the result.
Yeah, I mean, either way, people are going to be unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It says something. It says a lot that after Biden was announced that the rest of the world celebrated.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, they showed the screenshot or a shot of Paris
Right.
after the election, and right, church bells are ringing.
Yeah.
Right?
They had fireworks in London.
That's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they have the what's it called, Million MAGA March going on now.
Yeah, I heard something about there was a few people gathering in Washington. I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know what they're hoping to do, but it's
Well, listen, the ballots in Georgia are being hand counted as we speak, and they're supposed to be completed by Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So that will poo-poo any of this conspiracy talk that involves Georgia.
Right.
I don't want to hear about any software that's changing votes. I don't want to hear about any special ink that's on the ballots that affects the scanning. Someone's looking at the ballot, Biden, Trump, and you count them that way.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as the states get certified and it marches towards December when they have to do the electoral college. I mean, once that happens, we'll see. Once the electoral college happens, if they pick Biden, then
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to say. I mean, that's pretty much all over.
A lot of them are, it's not everyone. I don't want to paint the entire that side with such a broad brush, but there are a noticeable number of people that are posting, "Oh, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to,
Yeah.
pick up my weapons and start going crazy."
Right.
That's very incendiary talk,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we have to understand that this was to me again. This resembles 2016, where there were a lot of people expectant of a Hillary Clinton presidency,
Mm-hmm.
and ready for a party, and then they were let down.
Right.
Now the left typically does not say things like that. Oh yeah, I'm going to pick up my weapons and do this and do that, but
Mm-hmm.
they were taken aback, and they did accept the defeat. They didn't like it.
Yeah.
They didn't go out
Do you
here.
remember in 2016 though how after Trump was elected, what the left was doing? The left basically went, well, okay, we should reach out to those American. Obviously, we didn't message well enough, and
Right.
they went looking for what message they needed to sell. The Trump supporters, and I think in the years since then they've kind of so it was a very introspective thing, right? Like they turned around, they looked inward, and they're like, "Oh, what do we do wrong?"
Right.
Whereas right now it's like, Yeah, I don't. Did you hear? Have you seen any footage from the Million MAGA March,
No,
whatever?
I haven't seen any footage of it.
No,
I
they
did hear.
were. I saw some footage of it on Twitter earlier.
Uh,
You know what they were chanting?
what's that?
F Joe Biden.
Hell, he hasn't even made it in office yet.
I know.
What are you effing him about?
I mean, I don't know. I can't say the left wouldn't do anything like that. I'm pretty sure they probably did
Oh,
chant stuff like
right.
that
Listen,
when.
there was that women's march. What
Mhm.
the weekend after the election, or was it no the inauguration? It was the week.
It
It
was
was the
after the
weekend.
inauguration,
Yeah,
yeah.
and but again, that's their right. They weren't out there rioting. They weren't out there,
Right.
just uh, hey, we're going to be civilly disobedient or attempt to overthrow the country. That's what some of these people on the right are
Oh
saying,
yeah, yeah.
and that's where I we need to be very careful about that.
Well, so the other development this week. You've heard about a lot of the conservatives on social media were saying they're leaving other social media. They're
Oh yeah,
leaving like Twitter and Facebook to go to
yeah,
other social media
yeah,
platforms.
yeah, yeah.
And it's one of those things, though. They say they're leaving specifically because they were being censored
Mm-hmm.
on other platforms for saying things like, you know,
Right.
death threats and
It
stuff
doesn't
like
make
that.
any sense.
Which means if they're going to go to another platform that allows that,
Right.
how much more if these people are stewing in that stuff,
Oh yeah.
um, how much worse.
One of my former squad members in the Corps, uh, he says he posts on Facebook, yeah, I've been on this platform for a week now, and there's some very I found it funny how he labeled it. He said there's some very interesting information about the elections and the voting. And okay, I'm glad you didn't label it as facts
Right,
because it's not facts. And
right,
interesting, I wouldn't say I would say it's garbage. That's just me. A lot of what they're putting out there is so off the wall, and I
right.
still maintain if you have evidence of this corruption and this illegality,
Hmm.
show it to the authorities and let
Right.
those that perpetrated the crime get prosecuted.
Well, so did you hear about what happened to Tucker Carlson this week?
No.
So he apparently on his show tried to accuse Georgia of having all sorts of problems with their elections by claiming that there was dead people voting. And
Yeah.
he like listed two people's names off and said, "Here's two people who are," and he showed like death certificates with these people's names,
Mm-hmm.
and then showing that these people voted. So then local media in Georgia went and tracked those people down
Uh-huh.
and found those they were both very much alive.
Wow.
And they
Oh, okay.
interviewed them. And
Right.
Tucker Carlson then had to go onto his show last night or the night before and apologize.
No, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Tucker, for apologizing, spreading misinformation. I mean, listen, that's one of those things, and people on the right constantly lambast the media as fake news and this and that. Now we could
Right.
talk about journalistic integrity and the work that they need to maintain the public's trust.
Hmm.
But Tucker, who's one of those people that lambasts and basically acts like he's not part of the mainstream media, for him to go out and do that, like you should have done that kind of investigative reporting prior to saying something like that.
Hmm.
And
Well,
so that's shame on you, man.
that's the funny thing. He claims, and God, I don't remember what there was a thing where his defense is he's not a news show, that he's opinion,
Right,
right?
right. Well,
So,
I've always said that. Right.
well, but
Those
in my
shows.
opinion, that's a lame excuse
Well, it
for
is.
going
It
out there and
is.
saying, that means that your opinion is. So if people get caught doing that kind of thing, and then they say, "Oh, it's okay, it's an opinion show," well, that means your opinions are garbage. Why do you have a show?
Right. Yeah. Well, exactly. My thing. Um. if you were to distinguish that, like most news channels, when they have someone come up and give an editorial, they'll make sure they preface it with that, and that the views of this person or individual are not necessarily shared by the station.
Right.
And so, right. And I'm not saying that you can't give editorials or opinions like that, but make it clear to everyone that that's what this is. You
Right.
know, and it's easy for Tucker to do that after the fact. Hey, what about the viewers that, didn't tune into that episode? What about those ones that, hey, I only catch Tucker, every so often or whatever, and I
Well,
never heard him apologize.
so the other thing to keep in mind, though, is the way that people consume their media now, right? They
Mhm.
get it on social media in clips.
Right.
So all a lot of people saw was not even Tucker's whole show. They saw the clip of Tucker's show making the accusation. They
Right.
never saw the apology.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Right.
So that's kind of the insidious part about social media, and the fact that so many people are just getting their information from social media.
Yep.
They lose so much context.
Right.
Just seeing clip, and it happens on both sides, right?
Yeah, it
You
does.
know,
It does.
that's the problem with getting your information that way. You're getting your information in, tiny little sound bites that are easily distorted.
Well, right. Well, not only that, you are typically consuming media that falls in line with your ideology
Right.
and your
Confirmation
thinking.
bias.
You're not sitting up here, okay, let me tune in to Fox. Hey, let me tune in to CNN or MSNBC just to get, a difference of opinion or a different perspective. People aren't doing that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Did you hear about the uh President Trump floated the idea of replacing electors in some of these swing states
Yeah. Yeah.
so that they may potentially call him as the winner.
Mm-hmm.
Eh, One is that's a state issue. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how, what influence he thought that he could exert over these
Some
individuals.
states allow that. Some states allow their electors to vote however they want.
Well, right, right. But what
Um,
I'm saying is that President Trump doesn't have the authority anywhere to just
so
step in and say, hey,
interestingly enough,
uh-huh,
I remember in 2016, after Trump won,
uh-huh,
between the time the election and the inauguration, or the electoral college, there were people on the left talking about flipping electors away
uh-huh.
from Trump toward Hillary,
Mm,
right? And since then, there have been states who've updated their laws to make it so that the electors have to go the way that the popular votes go.
okay.
And some of those were done by like Republican legislatures who were like afraid of the opposite happening. Well,
Right.
now that came up when Trump suggested it. There was actually 3 or 4 states who basically all said, nope, we can't. We have to go the way that the popular vote goes because that's the law in our state.
Wow. Yeah.
So
I mean, that's what people don't understand. These elections are run by these individual states. There's no federal voting authority or overseer that legislates or administers all of these individual states like that.
right. Personally, I find it funny. So if we can agree that electors shouldn't be able to go against the popular vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that seem
Right.
like a common sense thing? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's an argument that
Right.
they made at both bipartisan argument, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
So if you have these electors, but they can't go against the popular vote, why have them? Why not just have the popular vote?
Well, I mean, again,
Isn't the
we're
whole
talking
safeguard
about
that they
now.
have
Let's
against
be
them?
clear. We're talking about the vote in that individual state.
Right.
Right. So that's exactly how President Biden or Trump won,
Mhm.
where in one state he's winning by 16, 20,000 votes,
Right.
and California, which is overwhelmingly Democrat,
Hmm.
there's millions of votes for Hillary versus President Trump.
Right.
And right, if you're taking it by state basis, then yes, that's how those electors. Hey, I decide Montana decides to go for President Trump, or
Right.
we split our votes. If
Right.
it's
Well,
those
so
states do that.
this is why the census is
Uh
so
huh.
important, right? The
Right.
census we just had this year,
Yep.
because they pick the number of electors each state gets based
Hmm.
on the census.
Right.
So like California gets 55 electors right now versus like Arizona, I want to say I think it's 25 or 27, something like that.
Right.
Um, so I could be wrong. But so like yeah, each state depending on their population, whereas you get like Wyoming has like two or three.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it gets to a point where it seems like the original intent was that they'd have this layer that could stand up to the uh, you know tyranny of the mob, or however they put
Right.
it.
Right. Well,
So the original intent apparently was that the electors would be able to vote however they wanted and go against
right.
the popular vote, right?
Well, right. Because
But
it's
nowadays, it's like one of those things where if Trump won and they were like, okay, so he should get all the electors, don't flip any of the electors, right? Then why have them?
well, it's one of those things where the founding fathers, um, as much as they talk about freedom and your right to do this,
Hmm.
they kind of look down on the common man.
Right.
And that's exactly what that
Yeah.
electoral college was for, is that, hey, you might like this person, but guess what, we want to have a layer that we're going to make the right choice for you.
Right. They lived in a world that had the aristocracy and the peasantry,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what the Senate and the House are supposed to be. The House is supposed to be the closest to the people.
Right.
That's why there's more representative. And the Senate is actually kind of a representation of the aristocracy.
Right.
A few people, a few elites from each state get together and then decide for everybody else, which is
Right.
also where you get the problem where you've got Wyoming with literally less people than Macomb County, gets equal representation to California that has
Right.
55 million people.
Right. Right.
So,
Well, hey,
there's,
listen, it was made by humans, so they weren't
right.
perfect, and our system of government is far from perfect. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just I agree with you that we could look at the electoral college, but with it being written into the Constitution and the divisions and everything that we have now, I definitely don't see that. And Republicans would be concerned if there was a potential of it, being a federal, like the totality of the popular vote instead of the individual states.
Right.
They're already fearing that there'll never be another Republican president because of the mail-in votes.
Hmm.
Uh, I seriously think, especially after Lindsey Graham's interview, he had an interview, I forget with whom, but he talked about fixing mail-in voting. And it's one of those things where I am so concerned about that, because they already gutted the Voting Rights Act. If
Hmm.
they do this with mail-in voting, and you have to go to the polls, I just worry about us having any kind of turnout like what we had this past election.
Right.
People would just, like, why even bother? They're not going to count my vote. Which, right, they're trying to disenfranchise people.
Yeah. I mean, it literally has come down to, I mean, it's increasingly clear that the Republicans represent a minority of the
Right.
people, right? And that their tactics increasingly are those of people who have to protect a minority, its power, and disenfranchise the majority somehow, any way they can.
Yep.
So that's why they tried to sabotage the mail system. They literally tried to sabotage the post office.
Yeah.
I renewed my driver's license on my birthday in September. I still haven't gotten my new one in the mail.
Dude, you're right. I listen.
You know,
I don't think I'm gonna get a new license until I made an appointment. You know when my appointment what is?
when
February 2nd, I think.
when is
I
your
made I
license
made I
expire?
made an appointment. I made an appointment like 2 weeks ago. February 2nd, I think, is my appointment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, although I will say, when I had to go in September to the
Uh-huh.
Secretary of State's, it was not it was not a very safe experience. They basically had everybody outside in a big crowd,
Mm-hmm.
like together outside the doors,
Uh-huh.
filling out like paperwork and then waiting in line. And there was
Oh.
like no social distancing. Half the people had no masks.
Oh.
Um, and then they were like calling people in like one at a time. So inside the Secretary of State, there was social distancing and stuff, but the outside was a mess.
Oh
Uh,
man. Yeah.
yeah,
And right, like you said,
hopefully it's better.
people have to
But
change.
that was the thing, though. I got an appointment the same day. So if they're spacing it out now, that means they must have tried to do something to get a handle on that.
See, I
Hopefully.
how'd you get an appointment same day?
That's how it was in September.
Oh man.
I just went online to the website and Secretary of State said,
Oh
you know,
yeah. They yeah. Maybe it's because my birthday was in June or whatever,
okay.
and I moved after that. But
Uh,
still, I right, I shouldn't have to wait, man. I already, got into a situation at a bank where the teller was kind of rude to me
oh,
because
really?
the address on my license was different than the address on the account.
Oh, geez.
And I'm sure I could run into a situation like that. I mean, imagine if I get pulled over by the police and they say, hey, what's your address, and I give them my current address, and then, oh well, I moved, officer. Well, wait a minute, your registration and this and that. Like, well, yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't been able to make it to the Secretary of State.
right. Yeah, man.
It is. It's a mess. It's a mess, man. But that's
But
what.
that's the thing. You don't sabotage mail-in voting if you think you have a winning argument, right?
No,
And
exactly.
honestly, I mean, when I don't think the Republicans' problem, honestly, is going to be that they, uh, and this is going to, I'm not saying this is dark humor or anything. I'm not trying to be cute when I say this, but I think a bigger threat to their power is not so much more people voting through mail-in voting, because anyone can mail-in vote, right?
Right.
Their problem, they're going to see a long-term effect from all of these super spreader rallies they've been running around having, and they're continuing to have. Because I'll
Right.
tell you what, all the footage I saw of that rally happening in DC today, there's
hmm
very few masks.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, right now cases are spiking, especially in red states. The Dakotas are like totally.
Right.
They said the Dakotas are the worst place in the world right now.
Well,
For
that's the thing. They politicize wearing a mask,
mhm,
and there's been so many doctors saying, "Hey, we've gotten better at treating this illness now." And
mhm,
that's why one of the reasons why the death rate has gotten so low. But
right,
as the cases start to go up and there's more people getting hospitalized and the beds are being taken up, they are having in some areas to limit care. And
mhm,
I think we need to understand that, right? You have COVID because someone made, on the right, they made a discussion about, well, yeah, George Floyd was marked down as a COVID death because he had a coronavirus. And,
mhm,
yes, he had a knee pressed on his neck. Now, I'm not a medical expert
mhm,
or examiner. I don't know how much pressure he was applied to his neck and if that can stop someone from breathing. But if he did have coronavirus and and he's having a hard enough time to breathe, period. And
mhm.
now someone has, like, do you say, well, yeah, it wasn't coronavirus, it was the knee applied to his neck.
Plus,
Right.
I mean, well,
But
that's the whole thing. You can't say it didn't. I mean,
Ex- you can't. I mean, no one can.
yeah,
I mean, we don't know. It's not the same as if he got shot or whatever and died from the gunshot wound, and you say, oh well, he's got coronavirus, so but we're just gonna, we're not gonna say the gunshot did it, we're just gonna, say it was coronavirus. That's a
Right.
different scenario. George
Right.
Floyd, like, right, we don't know whether it was the knee itself or if the
Well,
addition of coronavirus
the other
is
thing
what
that I should
ultimately.
point out too, though, that you actually just said that was actually repeating some misinformation,
Mhm.
is that they never listed George Floyd as a coronavirus death. Like they listed coronavirus among the comorbidities on his death certificate.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it's like he wasn't like one of the they didn't like list him as having died from COVID.
See, yeah.
That's the whole thing. In his autopsy and on his death certificate, it was just that he was listed that he had coronavirus.
We need to post a link to that then, to that information,
Oh,
so
okay.
people can look at it, because right, that is out there, and I've heard it repeated multiple times.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So,
Well, it's one of those things. I mean, there's man, my sister sent me a video that someone had forwarded to her this week that was just some lady who claimed to be a renowned doctor, right? And it
uh-huh,
was another pandemic video, basically. It was this
uh-huh,
woman who starts off like the first couple of minutes of the video listing her credentials, right?
mhm.
But her credentials, for the most part, were like what TV shows and stuff she'd been on and things like that. Um, and she was a TV doctor
uh-huh.
basically, and she started to go on about like 5G and causing coronavirus and how they have like like the vaccine's going to have these nanobot implants that can control
Oh,
your mind and stuff. And
really?
yeah, and it was she starts off talking about like, look, take me seriously, I'm a really serious person, and then she just
Listen,
goes off on like,
it makes me think of those Holiday Inn Express commercials. Like, are you a doctor? No, but I played one on television.
yeah, yeah. Oh my
That's
god.
funny. But yeah, that postmaster general, getting back to the post office, I can't understand why he's not in jail, man. I mean,
Right.
you had a federal judge issue you a order, and you don't do this order. We've
Hmm.
already heard that, last I heard they had like over 300,000 ballots that they knew they had and hadn't delivered.
Hmm.
Like, to me, that he should be thrown in jail, if not for just keeping that mail from going where it was supposed to go,
Hmm.
but for obstruction of justice, or not obstruction, contempt of court.
I don't disagree. Um, Historically speaking, though, in authoritarian regimes, the people who do these types of things don't get held to account until after they're out of power.
Right, right.
You
Yeah.
know, so I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of Nuremberg trial type thing for the Trump regime after all this is over, right? I mean, for all the
uh
ones who are in jail right now, but I mean, like, think about all the things that they've done right now that are literally like Bill Barr.
oh, he's terrible.
I
He's
mean, he
terrible.
authorized the use of force on peaceful protesters so that
Yeah.
Trump could have a photo
Bible
op.
display.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the types of things he's done that in normal times under a normal administration would have been huge scandals.
Right.
But in this administration, it's another Tuesday,
Yep.
you
Yeah,
know?
it's bad. I mean, but like you said, it's authoritarianism, and as much as the right likes to complain of, they saw the election of Joe Biden as an existential threat to America,
Hmm.
which I don't even understand how you can say that after you see what President Trump has done. You seen him literally destroy such norms or whatever that we've had, long-standing traditions, and
Hmm.
he's taken a wrecking ball to them. And as
Well,
much as people say
yeah.
that that's what they wanted, so you want this chaos? It wasn't order that he was bringing to the table. It was chaos.
So you remember last week when we talked, I mentioned the asceticization of politics,
Yes.
um, and how some people, it's like they view these certain they associate a mythology with this certain symbology of right
Hmm.
of like theirs would be like the flag and the cross and guns, and
Hmm.
it's one of those things where they have So when they picture America and what makes it great, right? The thought of our institutions aren't what they think of,
Right.
right? So if our institutions are being attacked, they don't care. It's not what they consider part of America, right? The mythology of America in their mind is comprised of symbols that we're not thinking of. So like that's why they get super upset if a football player kneels during the national anthem, because the national anthem and that flag and the symbology of it is more important to them than whether or not someone's dismantling the State Department or the Justice Department.
Right.
Because they don't see, like, you and I, and that's the thing, like, we see the world and the government differently.
Right.
Because we see the government as a collection of the departments and institutions that comprise it, right? And
yeah, I think, and I don't know when John F. Kennedy gave that speech, but when he said,
ask not,
and think how far removed we are from that. I'm like, it's terrible, man. Like, they don't even see serving in these federal institutions is like an honorable thing. You're basically serving like an evil organization that's doing evil things as far as they're concerned. And like I said, these are Americans just like you. And I'm not saying that there can't be corrupt individuals in those positions. I think just our fallen nature shows that. But for the most part, these are individuals that want to do a good job. They want, they want to help the public. They understand that I'm working on your behalf. And we sit up here, we tear them down, we, castigate them, we call them everything, other than a child of God. And how do you think that makes them feel? How do you think that make their family feels? Where hey, what's your husband do? Oh, he works at the State Department. Oh, that's that terrible person.
Right. It's like you mentioned. That's actually a good point. Is that what Trump actually did was took what was an ambivalence to those institutions and turned it into a hostility.
Oh yeah.
He made them the enemy.
Right.
So that's it's one of those things. It's hard to understand how a country can survive when half the population hates the institutions that comprise the country.
Yeah, that's I don't get it, man. And not at this point, it's not even just the institutions now, man. And you can almost say this about both sides now. It's like I think it might be slightly less on the left, but both sides hate each other, and they hate what what the other side represents and stands for. And like you said, how does a country sustain itself when you got 70 something million people on one side, they think this way, another 70, 80 million on the other side that think this way, and then the rest are in between, like, well, I'll just float between this one and that one. But they're like, you're the enemy. What you represent is evil. What you represent is hate and this and that. And if you get in power, it's the end of America. Both sides think that the end of America is happening. So it's chaos, man.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because it's like I've talked to people who are on the right and they say, "Oh, what do you fear? Oh, socialism. America's going to become a socialist country." Well, what would that look like?
Yeah.
Well, they're going to have universal health care.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. Terrible, I tell you.
Oh,
terrible.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, terrible.
Universal health care. Oh, wow, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And they have this idea that it would be. They think like, oh my God, it would be the worst thing ever, right? Because they've been told whatever that mythology is. But you talk to people on the left, though, and it's like, what do you fear? And it's literally like a slide into a military police state.
Yeah.
That's it's almost. Are you familiar with Pascal's wager?
No.
No.
Nope.
So here's when this theology for Pascal's wager was basically that it was an argument for belief in God, and the idea as well. Okay, so if the Christians are right, and you believe in God, then you'll get into heaven. But if you don't believe in God, if the Christians are right and you don't believe in God, then you go to hell. And if you are right, then and you believe in God, then you haven't lost anything, right? If because if you're an agnostic or whatever, an atheist, then you believe in a God, then and there isn't one, then hey, all you've done is waste a little time,
right?
And if you're wrong, then you could get in heaven, So his whole argument was basically that there was like no downside to believing in it, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like the
Now that video, they talked to some individuals in New York about the what Americans thought, like the cost of socialized medicine were, and right, a lot of them are like, oh yeah, it's gonna cost this, and I'd rather do this, and they're like, well, it's cheaper, in this country, or it's cheaper there, and a lot of them were surprised, but that's what socialized medicine is supposed to do. And I have health care coverage through my employer, but there are people that can't afford to go to the doctor. They can't even afford to go take, like, if they're sick, they can't even afford to call off to go to the doctor because they're like, I won't get paid. And that's terrible, because if there's something seriously wrong with them, then you may increase the effects or the consequences of not seeing a doctor because you say you can't afford to. I don't know if you ever saw the show 30 Days with Morgan Spurlock, the creator of Super Size Me. So the very first episode was about living on minimum wage. And he did that for 30 days with his fiance at the time. I don't know if they're married now, but he started out with 30 days of minimum wage money. So he had to get someplace to stay. They had to buy groceries, they had to secure jobs, and he ended up actually getting a job that paid him more than minimum wage. So at the end of the 30 days, I forget how much he was in the hole. And I forget how much he was, but he got hurt. In one job, he was landscaping, and in ripping up somebody's lawn, he had hurt his I forget if it was his elbow or wrist, but he had to go to the emergency room, and so he got a bill for that. Then his fiance got like a urinary tract infection, so she had to go to the emergency room because she was in so much pain.
Right, with no insurance, probably.
But again, that's something that people who are in that, they have to do that month after month. And imagine, every month
when they're trapped in that cycle,
$400, $500 in the hole.
Right.
So healthcare is something to me. We talk about our Constitution and how great it is. And it says in there that, the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, or whatever. To me, healthcare is one of those intangibles that's wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
And we don't do a good job here. I mean, even though they say that, America has the best healthcare system in the world, that's if you have money. If you have money, right, I can afford to get the best of the best. I can afford to go wherever.
Right.
Everybody doesn't have that kind of money.
Right. Well, it's another thing too, that the system that we do have, one of the things that's not talked about a lot when in the argument for Medicare for all or universal health care of some kind is the fact that by tying it to employment, it gives employers more leverage over the employees. Like you said,
Right.
there's people now who feel like I have to go to work, even
Right.
though I'm sick or hurt or whatever, because I'm afraid I'll lose my job or
Right.
whatever. Right. So it's, or I might lose I'm going to keep this job that I hate because I don't want to lose the healthcare coverage.
Right.
And it's one of those powers that they keep over us that if they took that away and everybody just had health insurance provided that was paid for by their taxes, that would be leverage the employers would lose over the employees. You would have more freedom of movement. People would be more free to leave jobs they hated.
Right. Well, this is how I think about it.
Greater
They
freedom.
need to frame, the left needs to frame the argument to these corporations that they would ultimately save money. And corporations, hey, that's their main money. That's their main thing. It's not about, we're doing something for the common good or the public or whatever. It's about them shareholders for the most part.
Right.
If you're a publicly traded company. So if you frame that argument that way, and listen, if someone wants to have a policy, a health insurance policy, almost like a supplemental policy for Medicaid or whatever, or Medicare, you can do that. You have a job, you want to, put a $1,000, policy in addition to that, you can. Or
Right.
whatever. You want to go and see this network of doctors or this particular doctor, you can, and you got your flexibility. But I don't care if it's the when I go to my friend's house and it's the homeless guy on the corner now at DeQuinder and Hall. He should be able to go to the doctor. He shouldn't be sitting up there thinking like, well, I don't have insurance, I can't go, and my toes are about to fall off. They're black and blue, but I can't go.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I that's one of those things. I'm all for like universal health care because it just makes fiscal sense. Right. Like
I am too.
It's a burden off. It's a cost off the employers. It's a burden off of everybody in terms. It's the best deal because the whole idea of insurance is spreading the risk out, and the greatest risk pool you could possibly get would be the whole country.
Right.
So.
Wait, listen, we're the most obese country on the world. Yeah, we need that pool to include as many healthy people as we can.
Right. Exactly. So it's one of those things that the arguments for keeping it the way it is are honestly all emotional, in my opinion. It's either an emotional argument about fearing change, or you have some kind of financial investment in it keeping it the way it is. Like you work for the health insurance industry or something like that now. I can understand people who say that, people who've made that argument. Well, I work for a health insurance company. I'm worried I'd lose my job. I'm like, well.
And I had this discussion with someone that fire and police protection are socialized, things.
They are.
And they're like, oh no, it's not, etc. I said, listen, if I don't pay my taxes, like, eventually my home will I'll have a lien on it and I may get, foreclosed on. But if I haven't paid that tax bill or whatever, and my house gets caught on fire, the fire department, is not coming saying, hey, you didn't pay your tax bill. Now listen, there are some areas of our country where you do have to pay for fire protection.
Oh yeah, and there's a famous video of that from a few years ago where the firemen stood back and let a house burn because a guy hadn't paid his fire
they didn't pay their bill, but the neighbors did.
Right.
So they were there to make sure. And this is exactly what it was like in the past. The fire department just wasn't going and putting everybody's house. Like, hey, listen, you don't have fire protection? Right. We're not putting out this fire, yo.
Right.
Well, just so that it don't spread.
It's funny when people say that those things are not socialized, because they are textbook socialized. The firefighters and policemen work for the government. The equipment is all owned by the government. Right. Like the fire trucks, the police cars, the guns, all of it's owned by the government.
They're not responding to a call saying, sir, did you pay your taxes? Oh, you didn't? Right. Okay, go ahead, proceed to, rob, murder, or
Their
kill this
services have
person.
already been paid for.
Right.
Yeah, with your taxes.
Yep.
And that's the whole thing when people say, oh, well, you want free healthcare or free college. It's like, no, I'm already paying a lot in taxes. Like, you
Right.
remember the fact that we had this conversation that you don't even like how much we pay in taxes? Well, my whole thing is I just want that money to go to something else.
Right. Yeah,
That's all,
exactly.
you know?
I agree with you, man. I mean, but they've done a good job of framing the argument. Now that argument
Hmm.
needs to be reframed.
Hmm.
And it just there hasn't been a leader. I mean, I do. I wish that President Obama would have had the or utilized the bully pulpit as much as President Trump did to, motivate people like, like President Trump did. If he would have been able to do that, I mean,
Yeah.
right, we may have had been able to push that through. Now let's not forget the Democrats in 2008 had a
Hmm.
super majority,
Yeah.
and it was the Blue Dog Democrats that they had to fight. I mean, like
Yeah.
literally tooth
Hmm.
and nail, they had to fight with
Yeah.
them to get the ACA approved.
I mean, that's why I say I'm constantly correcting people, and it always pisses people off. But I'm constantly correcting my friends and stuff when they say, "Oh, the Liberal Party versus the Conservative Party." I'm like, we don't have a Liberal Party. There's
Yeah,
no Liberal Party in America.
right.
The Democratic Party does not represent liberal policy
Yeah,
in
no,
any way. I mean, they're not even advocating for Medicare for all.
right.
You know, so we have two conservative parties. One is just completely batshit crazy. You know,
Right. Well, I mean, hey, I know people have uh lamented the fact that we don't have a viable third party in this
right,
country.
right.
And right, we don't.
Well, and that's because of our own system.
Well, you listen, it can be done. It's just that we as the public don't give credence to those third party candidates. I mean,
Well,
these
there are
third
things
party
you could do at
candidates.
the state level to make it so. Like, there are states that have done, like, what's it called, instant runoff
Hmm.
voting, where you
Yeah,
actually get like a ranked choice, where you pick like your first,
right,
second, third choice,
right.
and that would give third parties a lot more
Hmm.
representation.
Well, right. I mean, again, you're right. It is but again, the states are the ones that run the elections.
Right.
That's a state
And that's
matter.
why you'd
But
have to do something like that state by state.
well, right, they would. But again, there are candidates that are on state ballots out there that were running for president,
Hmm.
and I didn't look at the exact amount of votes or whatever. One candidate got like 1.3 million. One presidential candidate, another one I got almost a million. But that's where I'm saying, like, in these states that do allow third parties or whatever, they're not even a viable candidate in those states.
Hmm.
And even if they were on the ballot across the country, I don't see them getting that many votes because we as a public, it was one video of an African American mother. She's going off on her son because her son voted for a third party candidate. And she's
Uh,
like, that's a vote for President Trump. That's a
hmm.
wasted vote. That's what a lot of people think of him
Yeah.
as a wasted vote because they
Hmm.
they don't, like you said, they're not on every ballot everywhere. And
Well,
even if they were, I don't think that they would get. I don't think they would get even 10% of the vote overall.
I mean, part of the problem is that the presidential election is kind of the mother of all elections, and even though the states run the elections,
Mm-hmm.
everything basically comes down to the electoral college,
Mm-hmm.
right, and the Constitution, the federal
Right.
government kind of running that whole system.
Right.
The first past the post winner take all system that we have at the moment at the
Mm-hmm.
presidential level
Right.
is really what kind of makes that two-party system happen, because
Mm-hmm.
those are really the only two options that you get at the presidential level. Those are the two parties that get to have that waterfall effect for infrastructure throughout all the
Right.
rest of the ballot, right?
Right.
Personally, I have for a long time, when I vote, I will, as often as possible, vote for a third party local candidate over either of the two parties.
Uh-huh.
Being that, like, if you can build up the local infrastructure of the third parties,
Uh-huh.
then, and you can do that across the states, then they become more competitive for a
So let's
presidential race. That's
see.
part of the problem right now, is they don't have the infrastructure to compete across all 50 states.
So listen, Millard Fillmore was a Whig, bro. Zachary
Yeah.
Taylor was a Whig. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you know, and
Right.
then the last one that I see on here, oh, William Henry Harrison. Last one.
Right.
And you're talking about, no, I'm sorry, I'm reading that
Well,
wrong.
wait a minute.
No, yeah, Millard Fillmore was the last one, 1853.
What about did Teddy Roosevelt win when he ran as a Bull Moose Party, or?
Bro, after that, I see is Republican and Democrat on here.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's not good. That's not good.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's entrenched power.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. If you could at the state level implement ranked choice voting or
Yeah.
something like that,
Uh-huh.
um, you would give the third parties a lot more power in the state level and at the local level, and that would build up the third parties to be more competitive for the presidential race.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah. I mean, but that's where people need to want that change. I get tired of people just blaming it on the system
mhm.
or these the candidates, the media. No, it's like
all of
you have who you want.
well, all of that goes to the fact that the root problem is people's unwillingness to be involved in the government, right? The fact that they want, like, especially on the right, they tend to elect someone that they think is going to, they want a leader, right? They want someone they're going to elect who's going to solve all their problems, rather than electing a representative who's supposed to do what the people have elected him to do, who's
Right.
supposed to follow the will of the people.
Right.
So that's kind of the challenge, right? You either have a participatory democracy
Mm-hmm.
with an informed and engaged electorate, or you have a bunch of uninformed people just following along at the whim of a strongman. But that's
What
what those people
happened?
want.
But what happened to America, man? Because America, from everything I've read,
Hmm.
at the dawn of this country, were very informed voters. They
Hmm.
knew the candidates, they knew their positions, etc. What do you think were some of the contributors to Americans being so disconnected now from the process?
The fact that the process has gotten so ugly, I think, is a large part of it. A lot of people see politics as something that they don't want to have to deal with. Like, even right now, like, there's a really popular meme going around, social media, saying, like, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to not being able to pay attention to politics again." And it's like, well,
Right.
that was the problem in the first place.
Right.
It's kind of like driving a car and not watching the road.
Uh-huh.
It's like, it doesn't usually end well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure,
Well,
it's
hey,
relaxing for a few seconds,
it's a
but
lot of people that when they get those Teslas and the autopilot, they're sitting up there either asleep or reading a newspaper or a book, etc. And
yeah,
and it says you're not supposed to do that.
I can't even imagine. I I mean, I don't know how much I would even. I mean, I don't know. I'm really torn on that, actually. Part of me would love automated cars. If all of the cars were automated, I would be
Uh
way more comfortable with it. As long as there's some people in control of their car,
huh.
then I'm not that comfortable, because that's the weak link, right?
Right.
If the system's all automated and all computerized, I actually have more confidence in it.
Well, you're right, but look how much difficulty Tom Cruise had in getting away from the authorities in Minority Report with those kind of cars.
What was the other one? I just saw something too that was man, I can't remember. It was a show I saw where they had, like, self-driving cars, And one of the episodes, it was about basically like the car lost control and the guy gets killed.
Uh-huh.
And the whole thing is, like, uh, what if you're in the car and basically the car stops responding to you
Right.
and, does something crazy.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, we both work in IT and we've seen devices do some unexpected things.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
software is created and managed by fallible entities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Judging by how often my Amazon device goes off because it thinks it heard something,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how much I would trust my car to not think it just heard me say turn left or something. Oh, what? Turn right now? Okay.
Right. Yeah. Uh,
That's why the Jetsons had controls. Did you notice that? The Jetsons had manual controls.
yeah. 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 Hey, listen, we might not see it, in our lifetimes, but yeah, I do think that that's where it's gonna go. Um, but yeah, it's some of that scares me as much as I would like to see it. It's scary because
Oh, yeah.
you're ultimately giving up control,
Mm-hmm.
and that's hard for some people to do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, part of me thinks if that actually took off, you could revitalize the bar industry overnight.
Yep.
If suddenly
Yep.
people didn't have to worry about driving drunk, you could just, go hopping in your automated car and it would take you back home.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, listen. Some people just boneheads with the amount of ride share options that we have, Lyft,
Right.
Uber. You shouldn't do that anyway. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no reason why you can't. Hey, yeah, I'm skunk drunk. You call a Lyft.
Right. See, that scenario right there
uh,
is why I would never be an Uber or Lyft driver.
oh, dude, listen.
Right.
Can you imagine? Like, who pays for that, man? If someone, like wretches in an Uber or Lyft,
Right.
do you get
Like
charged for that?
it's like one thing if it's a taxi, right? And it's not yours and
Yeah,
you're gonna take it. Like, do you
yeah,
remember watching Taxi when we were
yeah,
kids?
yep,
It's like the taxis would all go back to the depot and somebody
yeah,
would clean them out
yeah,
and stuff,
yep.
But if it's your car
It's your car. It's your
and
car, dude.
and somebody does that the night before in the back of your car, and then you got to go to work the next morning.
Oh, oh. It's got to be something tied into those contracts that yeah you'll get charged or whatever for the driver to protect themselves that way.
So what
I have
happened
to
in
believe that
California? California just had a proposition on the ballot that had to do
it
with gig
passed, didn't it?
workers like that.
Yeah,
I'm honestly not sure.
I
To be
thought it
honest,
did pass.
not living in California, I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah, I think that initiative passed or whatever. I mean, and listen, it's a new industry. It's something that they have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Uh, and hey, I've only used it a few times. One weekend I was engaged in an activity or whatever, and I didn't leave to get my son in enough time, so I called him a lift, which
Hmm.
was it was convenient. They were able to pick him up, faster than I would have been able to, do it. And he had a cell phone. I'm texting him, hey,
Okay.
let me know when they pick you up. Let me know when they drop you off,
Okay.
etc. And stuff like that. I mean, right. I find it very convenient to have that option available
Right.
to.
Yeah. Now the idea I know that you know, the auto industry has is because it was just actually man, it was a few years ago now at the auto show where they unveiled these um, automated vehicles that were basically like these driving billboards.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you remember those, what company
No.
it was. I want to say Mitsubishi, but I'm not positive. But they had these like self-driving cars that were basically like these driving billboards that you get in and out of, and they would have advertisements on the sides, and it would be like this commodity, right? Where like it would be like a Lyft or an Uber, but it would be like an automated driver, right? So it would turn these vehicles and driving and transportation into you know, a service, like, an automated service like that. Just like you were
Wow.
describing, but there would be no
Right.
human involved.
Right.
Hey, go pick up my son.
Right.
And some drone car would go pick
Oh
up your
wow.
son.
Wow. Yeah, I hadn't heard that, man. It's funny because we both live in Michigan, and
Hmm.
I was complaining about the road construction the other day.
Hmm.
Now this must have been I want to say this was maybe close to 18, 20 years ago that I saw this, but there was this um someone was trying to fund, it was like a road uh block where you would have these sections of road, and I
Hmm.
forget how wide they were. It might have been like maybe a 3 by 3 foot block, and it actually was made up of like LEDs.
Okay.
It was like some kind of steel housing for the square. Then it was LED blocks or something to that effect. And they were the proposal that they were talking about was where you can have these blocks where now I don't have to break up the entire road. If something goes bad, you can have these blocks where you don't have to have road signs in all these places where like they're doing construction and they have to put it up, and you're okay, right, you're going from 3 lanes to two. You can have that with these LEDs, and you would program them where it would basically show you like, hey, you're converging, you
So the
know,
lines would be done in LED.
exactly.
Okay.
Then it was also saying that they would not generate like a tremendous amount of heat, but they would generate enough heat where it would melt like snow.
Hmm.
They were saying that because it would you could have space underneath the road to run like cabling, etc. So when there's you know a company wanting to run and build infrastructure, they wouldn't have to have all this with construction and road closures.
Right.
And I'm like, man, that sounds like an awesome idea.
Uh-huh.
And of course it never came about, but I'm just like, we don't think outside the box like that.
Or we're not
That
willing to fund outside the box
Well,
ideas
yeah,
like that.
and
Yeah.
that's probably more. But think about the cost savings, the eventual cost savings. Yeah, it would be a huge outlay to get that infrastructure built. But just like
Honestly, you know what I thought of when you just first described that?
what's that?
Have you ever seen how often those signs by the road, the construction signs that have like, going down to 3 lanes, how often those things get hacked?
Well, yeah, they do get hacked, but I
So
mean,
just imagine if you had like something you could hack that could control the lines on the
but
road, how
but
much
Kyle,
chaos you could cause.
we were just talking about cars. You don't think hackers are actually trying to do those too?
Oh yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just a matter of time before they actually be able to control it with any kind of dependability.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's where I was getting at with that other show I talked about. Like that's the fear, that you get this car that's automated like that.
Right.
What if somebody does hack it?
Right. Well, I
Um,
I mean, yeah, we're moving into a world where that's going to be more of a possibility than not. And like I
mhm.
said, the initial outlay of funds would be huge, but we did that when we built the interstate highways. We didn't
Right.
have those, prior to the 40s.
Hmm. Right.
Well, all those GIs coming back, and right, taxes were a lot higher. Hey, we
Right.
want to,
They could
start,
fund that stuff.
traveling and create, foster interstate commerce.
Yeah. Holy cow, we're over an hour. Wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe we've been talking. So,
Man, you talk too much.
shoot. Man, we didn't even talk about movies or anything. Like,
Well, hey, listen, we always got next week, man. I'm glad we're making this, more concerted effort to be regular on our recordings.
Yeah. I'm trying to get better at my post production too.
Yeah. Well, hey,
You know.
you'll get there.
All right, man. All right, I'm gonna let you go. Good episode.
Yes, sir.
Good talk. And for Intellicide, signing off.
All right. See you later, sir.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.